Surely, you have wondered about your roots, as it is intriguing to investigate where we come from, who our ancestors were, and what they were like. What is your genetic origin? The easiest way to find out where you come from is to learn about your family history and search through historical records. However, wars, dictatorships, and migrations have separated families, leading to the loss of valuable information. Your surname can also provide some answers, but it is possible that your ancestors changed their surnames to avoid persecution, as was common among Jews during the Middle Ages. If you are from America, it becomes complicated because there are few records that go back more than a couple of hundred years. Additionally, slaves and laborers were often baptized with the surname of their owner or godfather. That's why getting DNA tests to know your origins is very trendy. These tests can tell you how prone you are to certain diseases, how well or poorly you metabolize certain medications, and even crazy things like what ice cream flavor you prefer, your chronotype, or some personality traits. They also help you find relatives, that father who went to the store 20 years ago, or even discover that your brother is actually your half-brother, not your full brother as you thought, and of course, your origins. Are they wizards? How do they do it? With a sample of your saliva, they extract your entire genome, which includes all the DNA contained in your 23 pairs of chromosomes and your mitochondrial DNA. The DNA from your chromosomes holds half of the information from your mother and the other half from your father. Let's suppose your family claims to be descendants of Charles V. His children had 50% of his DNA, his grandchildren 25%, his great-grandchildren 6.2%, his great-great-grandchildren only 1.5%. After 10 generations, the DNA has recombined so much that the amount of DNA shared with Charles V is insignificant. DNA tests only look back about 4 generations, and they provide clues about your ancestry because certain mutations can be associated with specific geographical regions. In addition to the DNA from your chromosomes, mitochondrial DNA is also extracted. Regardless of your sex, your mitochondrial DNA comes from your mother, and her mitochondrial DNA comes from her mother, and so on. This DNA allows us to trace our maternal common origin back in time, even as far as about 200,000 years ago in Africa. The problem is that mitochondrial DNA has a very high mutation rate. Within the same cell, each mitochondrion can have a different sequence, and there are several copies of mitochondrial DNA within each mitochondrion, which can also vary. To determine where your mitochondrial DNA comes from, all the mitochondrial DNA from all the cells in your saliva sample is taken, and something like an average sequence is obtained to identify the origin. The advantage is that significant mutations are rare and can be geographically located. This gives rise to what is known as haplogroups, which are groups of populations that are clustered based on the presence or absence of certain mutations. Just as there are haplogroups for mitochondrial DNA, our paternal lineage can be determined through haplogroups of the Y chromosome DNA. Similar to mitochondrial DNA, the Y chromosome provides information only about our paternal line. The most recent common male ancestor, the man related to all males, has also been traced back, and it is believed that he lived around 60,000 to 90,000 years ago in Africa. The issue arises if your biological sex is XX. In that case, you do not have a Y chromosome. However, if you have brothers or paternal uncles, it is possible to ask them for a sample and analyze it to determine your paternal haplogroup. For DNA studies, thousands of parts of your entire genome are taken and compared in databases, and the results provide percentages of your potential origins. If you want to know where you come from and don't want to pay for a DNA analysis, curiously, these questions can give you an idea. Do you enjoy trying new foods, traveling to exotic places, and always seeking adventure? It is very likely that your ancestors were nomadic pastoralists, and this trait becomes stronger in groups in the Americas. Apparently, this trait has been associated with the exon 3 of the dopamine receptor D4 gene, which helped tribes maintain their appetite for novel places and experiences. How is the earwax or cerumen in your ear? Is it wet or dry? Dry earwax, which is light-colored and flaky, is present in almost 100% of the population in northern China and Korea, and it is very common in Japan. In Southeast Asia and the Americas, half of the population has dry earwax, while the other half has wet earwax, which is yellowish or brown and sticky. In Europe, wet earwax is the most common type, while dry earwax is almost non-existent in Africa. The ABCC11 gene provides instructions for cells to move fat from their interior. The variant for dry earwax emerged as a mutation around 2,000 generations ago and is one of the few genetic variants that show such a distinct geographical difference. This same gene is is also related to body odor. People in Korea, China, and Japan usually don't have a strong body odor. In fact, almost nobody uses deodorant, and they think foreigners have a distinct smell. Are you an adult and can you drink milk without any problem? Until a few thousand years ago, adults couldn't drink milk until a mutation emerged in northern and central Europe, as well as some regions of Africa and Asia, which led to the development of lactose tolerance in adults. Currently, lactose tolerance is distributed in this way. The history of why some people are lactose tolerant is quite fascinating. In societies where dairy products were heavily consumed, the mutation emerged. Those who did not have the mutation likely died from consuming dairy products because they always experienced diarrhea, and during times of famine, they were the first to perish. Meanwhile, those with the mutation could benefit from the nutrients in milk without adverse effects. Do you lack wisdom teeth? The first fossil without wisdom teeth is from present-day China and lived about 300 to 400,000 years ago. The indigenous peoples of what is now Mexico do not have wisdom teeth either. They are also not common among Asians and Inuits. 25% of Europeans and only 11% of Africans do not have at least one wisdom tooth. What is your hair like? In our hair, the migration and evolution of humans are written. In sub-Saharan Africa, very curly and black hair was favored. Migrations to East Asia led to straight and thick hair, though it also had a dark color. In Europe, mutations for wavy hair and light colors emerged later, as well as mutations for straight hair, independent of those in Asia. Are you Latino and do you have asthma or a risk of breast cancer? You probably have some European ancestry. If you drink alcohol, do you get flush? Some people have a deficiency in the enzyme that metabolizes acetaldehyde, which is a byproduct of alcohol. Unable to expel this toxic substance, they experience inflammation, dilation of blood vessels, redness of the skin, increased heart rate, and nausea. This deficiency is very common in East and Southeast Asians, as well as in Inuit populations. If you experience flushing when you drink, you might have genes related to this condition. Does the sun make you sneeze? When you go from a dark place to a bright one, do you feel the urge to sneeze? This trait is dominant and heritable, and it is widespread in Europe. Of course, a DNA test will be much more precise since it examines numerous genes. However, before you take one, or if you already have, there are a couple of things you should know. The results show your genetic predisposition to certain diseases or characteristics, but your environment plays a significant role. Perhaps you are not prone to cancer, but if you smoke, your risk increases. Conversely, you might have a genetic tendency and never develop it. Most of our traits are not dependent on a single gene, but on the interaction of many, and it is a developing science. They don't really show you your origin, rather, they show you where there is a current presence of the genes that you have. Each company conducts its studies and has its own markers. If a company wants to know the gene or genes that cause a high sensitivity to odors, they take the DNA of people who share this trait and look for similarities. In the end, it could be that odor sensitivity is not even influenced by genetics. Another important factor is that many times there is a correlation between traits, but there is no causation. Hypothetically, a study finds a relationship between height and straight hair, overlooking the fact that these two traits are common in the region. The results could show where a mutation originated, although not necessarily where your ancestors lived. Your genome is compared to the database of each company. So, if you are from Peru and the company has very few data from your country, it is more likely to relate you to another country for which it does have data. For this reason, if you come from a place with a great genetic variation, like Mexico, the results may not be very accurate. For example, a study observed that the Concac and Lacandan people have been so isolated that they are genetically as different from each other as a European is from a person of East Asian descent. On the other hand, these tests could give us the false idea that races exist and that biogeographic ancestry is evidence of genetic differences between races. Although some genes may confer certain characteristics, they do not prove the existence of races. Additionally, over the years and through migrations, our genome has acquired small parts from different places. If you liked the video, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to talk about a specific topic, comment below.